Good afternoon, everyone. As rightly mentioned by Abhay Bhai, it was our third webinar, so-called, what we call it as webinar now, and we are used to it now. So basically, this is the third one. Previously, we had the opportunity to, support clientele and friends by way of, COVID impact on the financials, and second one was on Tally as to how the firms can operate, through Tally technology, and Anand has dealt it very nicely. So today being the third, and the idea was to, not to just give you the case studies, but basically the thing was, there are various updates due to this COVID, situation, and taking you through the updates, because there are certain situations, or there are certain relaxations which you must know, because these are also a little tricky. So for smaller firm, those who are not very upgraded or updated, or not having workforce as of now, so they should know what are the updates and relaxations given. The second topic of today's seminar is, case studies. Like Abhay Bhai mentioned, these case studies, frankly, we thought and deliberated much, many a times, as to what are the types of case studies we must take. So what we have done is, these are the live case studies, and which are more or less applicable to small, medium, and large corporates. And these are all day to day. Though it looks very simple, but I feel that there are certain hidden messages and lot to learn from these case studies. Here only I should thank my team, Ashwin and Deepen, for bringing these beautiful case studies for all of us to have deliberation on. So, as I mentioned, these are all non-technical and simple, because I know that the participants, there are accountants, executives, directors, many management people, partners. So we wanted the case studies to be simple, and though we will not use the technical terms more here, we'll try to give you the examples, so that the technicality becomes very easy for you, and that is how we can deliberate. And as you know that we are always a question answer session at the end, and if it cannot be covered in question answer, we are always there to support and help you out. The GST team, throughout from the implementation till this stage, we are always there, and I hope that this will be very useful to all of us. We have also tried to cover the documentation part of the GST law, because I think we feel, and what we have studied is, even in our audit, documentation, and when there are concession given, like merchant exporters, whenever there are concessions given, the documentation becomes very critical. So we wanted to touch upon certain documentation where we felt that the clients, or the people are lacking there. So if time permits, Deepen would also take us through the documentation part, which is very, very important, because what will happen, I will give the one example, that whenever there is a concession given in any law, and through this documentation, whenever there are concession given, and we know in service tax that, that AR1 form and AR2 form, AR3 forms were required. And at the time of audit from the department, when these forms are not available, the entire benefit is just goes off, including that you are liable to pay interest and penalties, and that will come after 5 or 7 years. So we wanted to touch upon certain documents, key documentation, which will like to not to go very technicality, but very basics of the documentation, which is applicable to all. And with this, I think we'll all have a happy learning, and I hand over to Deepen to start the session. And whenever there is, I would like to pitch in, or want to add, I will definitely add on the case studies or any technical part during our session. Thanks. Over to Deepen.
Thank you, Dushan Bhai. Good afternoon, one and all. The flow of discussion. The flow of discussion would be, starting will be recent GST updates. Then I will take you through some the case studies which are circulated on critical and emerging issues in GST. Thereafter, if time permits, we will touch upon important documentations which are required under GST law. So starting with recent GST updates. First of all, we will start with GST due date filing, GST audit report due date filing. The report filing due date for the year 18-19 has been extended, and the due date for return filing for turnover of more than 5 crore is 30th June. So, and turnover, so in this, turnover from 2 to 5 crore, GSTR 9C, which was earlier applicable for for turnover up to from 2 to 5 from above 2 crore, which has been relaxed that turnover above 5 crore only GST audit will be applicable. So turnover above only 5 crore, GST 9 and 9C are applicable. And there is also in October 2019, a relaxation was given that GSTR 9 for turnover up to 2 crore per PAN has been exempted, or it has been optional. But we would recommend that everyone should file GSTR 9 even if turnover is below 2 crore. Reasons for the same are there are certain transactions, like there are certain amendments. There are certain amendments in GST return which has been done in next year or in subsequent years, or there are certain ITC which has been claimed in subsequent years. But since if returns are not filed before due date, or if GST 9 is not filed, that amendments will not be reported, and hence I would request everyone that we should file all GST return GST 9 even if turnover is below 2 crores. Next, we will move to due dates in filing of GST returns for the month of February, March, April, and May 2020. For GST 3B due date for GST returns, GST 3B due date has been extended for turnover up to 1.5 crores. Approximately all the due dates has been extended up to 30th June. But this extension is with a condition that interest and late fees would not be applicable only and only if due dates returns are filed before the before the proposed due dates. So in case suppose February date has been extended to 30th June. So if returns are filed before 30th June, interest and late fees would be exempted. If returns are filed after 30th June, interest and late fees is to be paid, and that also at the regular rate, not at the concessional rate. Moving next to GST 3B returns for turnover from 1.5 crore to 5 crores. The due date same way has been extended, ranging from 20th June to 12th July. Next and important is GST 3B for turnover above 5 crores. For entity above 5 crores, the due date for return filing in GST 3B has been extended to 24th July 2020, but subject to condition. Interest at the rate 9% would be applicable if returns are filed by 24th June 2020, and if suppose the due date for the month of March is 20th, regular due date is 20th April 2020. So government has given an relaxation of 15 days, that up to 15 days interest would not be applicable. This one, sir. Hello, am I audible?
Dushyant, Dipesh voice is a bit not clear. Can you just chip in till his voice network stabilizes?
Hello. Yeah, Chetan bhai.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am audible now.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So we were on slide number. Just a minute. I'll just tell you. Slide number 7. Because I have my laptop also open. So here we are talking about the turnover above 5 crores, where the due date is the regular due date was as per the schedule, but the proposed date is extended by 24th of June. And what is important is that interest and late fee is waived only if you satisfy the condition of filing within the proposed due date, not otherwise. So that is the condition, that is a catch. And what Dipen was mentioning, that even the interest and late fees will be applicable as from the original due date and not from the the proposed due date. That is what the change. Next, Dipen. Dipen, next slide. Dipen, can you? Yeah. All right. So slide number 8. Now, the due date for filing GST return for the period Feb March the periodicity monthly for GSTR 1. Now here also the proposed due date is changed. If you see for March, April and May, most of the due dates are 30th of June, and late fees, there is no change for February and nil for no if filed by 30th June. So that is a change for even GSTR 1 which are monthly filers. The next is, and periodicity for quarterly, there also the due date is changed to 30th of June from January to March, that is the quarter, and late fees also nil if filed by 30th of June. Next slide. So basically these updates, yeah, okay.
Am I audible?
Yeah, now audible.
Okay. Relaxation in provisions of 36.4. So what is Rule 36.4? Rule 36.4 restricts claim of ITC in GST 3B to 10% above the eligible ITC as per GST 2A. So this rule was brought in from January to 2020, whereby the provision states that only 10% above GST 2A ITC would be can be taken by an assessee. Suppose if an assessee has filed a return and claimed excess ITC above 2A, so only 10% was eligible, else was not eligible. So this provision has been relaxed by the government due to this lockdown situation. But there is a condition attached to it that this restriction has to be followed in September 2020 GST return, and it has to be consolidated from February to February 2020 up to September 2020. Next is any further extensions is an relaxation would be given by the government.
Depends, just a minute. In the earlier slide, see the intention of the government is, since this is the COVID situation and people are not will not be able to consolidate and do a lot of data matching and data mapping. They said till August there is no issue if you can't basically map the data for 10% or 20%, whatever relaxation was there. So for September return, which is also a crucial return, as we know that the debit note, credit notes, all consolidation. So they want that September return or the quarter, they want that this relaxation of 10%, which is given otherwise for COVID period, there you need to consolidate all your 2A versus your 3B, and come to a conclusion that you are not taking credit more than 10%, which is prescribed. Thanks, Deepak. You can take it.
Next is whether any further relaxation would be given by the government due to this extension in lockdown period. Like for GST return, the due date for turnover of more than 5 crore was extended to 30th June with the condition that payment has to be done within 15 days from the due date of original return. That was 5th May. So if in this situation the lockdown has been extended to 3rd May, so whether government would be giving some relaxation for the lockdown as well. Another relaxation which may be expected is extension in due date of GST audit, because also GST audit has to be completed by 30th June, and still forms and even the timeline is limited. Another further relaxation which a trade may expect is relaxation in provisions of payment within 180 days, because there may be situation like the payment is due, but since due to lockdown there might be situation that we are not able to make the payment, so that this is then further relaxation which may be expected. Dushan bhai, your views on the same?
I think the same, because we see that relaxation was given keeping in mind the first lockdown or the period. Like Deepan said, there can be further relaxation in terms of payment or in terms of filing GSTR 9 or other returns. So let us see the future days. Government also is keeping eye on what is happening around the country. The first priority, of course, this COVID-19. But at the same time, our government is very keen and keeping track of all other compliances, like we see in company law, or be it other laws like income tax. So we are keeping an eye and we'll update you any relaxation which comes, and definitely you will get a mass email and other understanding from our side. Thanks, Deepan. You can take it.
So we will move further to case studies. So we will start with case study number 1. Hope everyone has gone through the case studies. So first case study is for block credits. So the case study is company A is a manufacturer of machinery. It has obtained following goods or services and makes in making payment of GST to its suppliers. The services which are obtained are food or catering services, tea or coffee services, health insurance, rent a cab. So in this, the question which was arise was whether A is eligible to take credit of the said goods or services, and there is certain scenarios which can be viewed like whether your answer would remain the same if the company is a trader in goods, tea or coffee, or a caterer, is an insurance company providing sub insurance, or is it is the company is an event organizer and as per contract they need to provide food, tea, and rent a cab services for the event. So now moving on, I will take you to the legal provisions of the Act, which says that under section 17(5)(b), subsection 1 and 3, block credits, input credit for goods and services which are not allowed, specifically not allowed, are foods and beverages, outdoor catering, beauty treatment, health services, cosmetics, rent a cab, health insurance, and life insurance. This all 8 types of services or goods rates are not available at all, even if it is for use of furtherance of business. But there is an exception in the said section as well. Exception is where the goods are used, where the said input credit are used for making an outward taxable supply. So in this case, so in our case study,
Just a minute, depend
sure.
making an outward taxable supply of the same category. That is very important because otherwise everybody is doing for business and that is not a concern. So if it is in the same category, then I think you can take it up. So it will be a better understanding for all of us.
So in the case study which we are referring, whether in the question first, whether A is eligible to take credit of the said goods. In this question, A is a manufacturer of machinery, and this all expenses which has been listed or goods or services which are listed are in the block credit category list. Hence, credit for none of the services would be eligible. In question number B, part A, if he is a trader in food, tea, coffee, or a caterer, if he is a trader, so exception will override since he is a trader and supplying goods, supplying food, which is a business activity of the trader. So credit for food, tea, and coffee would be eligible, but health insurance and rent a cab would not be eligible. In second case, insurance company providing sub insurance. So if an insurance company is providing sub insurance and insurance company has taken an insurance for providing an sub insurance, means he is a trader in insurance. So in that case, only health insurance, if he is a trader in insurance, would be eligible. But in that case also, if an insurance company is obtaining health insurance for its staff, then in that case, health insurance would also not be applicable. Event organizer, as per contract, he need to provide food, tea, and rent a cab services. So in this, since as per contract he need to provide food, tea, and rent a cab services, credit for food, tea, and rent a cab services would be eligible, but health insurance would not be eligible because since it is an block credit and it is an fixed block credit. Yushan, any views of yours?
So basically the idea was, as we know that we have traveled a lot in GST, and more or less most of the people know that these are the block credits, and the word is also very smartly used as block credit. But there are two aspects we wanted to highlight. One is there is an exception, and we have seen a lot of companies wherever they are providing taxable services to clients, and in that the contract mentions that with that taxable services. Now supposing, I will not give the name of the client, but there is a client in security services wherein the vehicle and other insurance, and they need to provide the services with the use of vehicles, those vehicles. Now those repairs or those type of services where they are obtaining, those credit will not be under block credit. What happens normally, down the line, the accountants or the other staff members need to be trained properly, so that the unnecessary block credit, which they feel that it is a block credit, which is actually not a block credit, but which is an eligible credit because of this exception. So that is to be understood. Secondly, a lot of times, though we know this is a block credit, so for a smaller setup, it is fine that one or two accountants are being trained and they are keeping an eye on the vouchers or the bills where they find such, out of these 8 items. But what happens when the entry level, clerks, or a lot many times the Pan India presence, not all are given trained, or whenever there is a direct entry, maybe nowadays with this technology, there are many salespersons or other staff, those who are moving, marketing staff, they are entering the, from their system, they are given gadgets. Nowadays technology, it happens. So whenever they are making a direct entry and they don't know whether it is a block or what, so whenever they have the voucher, they directly enter into the system, and probably the higher level manager or somebody, they may not go through it, and they just allow, the voucher to be entered in the system. There also the unnecessary GST credit, which is not eligible, can be, seen in the ITC ledger, and probably while processing the returns, that is unnecessary taken as the eligible credit. So, though the example, looks very simple that these are the block credit, but how you make your system efficient and control based, so that this unnecessary credit is not taken. At the same time, with the credit which are eligible of this nature, wherever you are providing a taxable services which is a part of your taxable items, there the credit is eligible and you take it off. So this is what we wanted to highlight with this case study. Thanks, Deepan. You can take it further.
Yeah. Next case study is regarding block credit for immovable property. So company A is a manufacturer. There is need for repair or renovation to the factory, and company desires to appoint a contractor for the said work and awards a contract. The work includes flooring works where machinery is installed, groundwork, roof work, electric work. The statutory auditor is of the view that said expenses being a major expenses, the same needs to capitalize, and the said view is accepted by the company. Whether company A is eligible to take credit for the said services. So in this, the question is related to same section 17. And also there are certain further questions like what would you answer in following scenarios? The said expenses is treated as a revenue expenses, and the same is accepted by statutory auditor. Flooring work done where machinery is installed is a special purpose flooring required for the said machinery. If the company provides only labor contracts to the contractor and procures material like cement, steel, sand, electric, etc., and provides to the contractors, if the said repairs for the building owned by the company treated as a revenue expenditure in profit and debited to profit and loss account for its own use and not for the business purpose. So we will just I will just take you to the sections which are relevant for the same. Section 17(5) C, subsection C and D, block credits, works, contract, services, or if separate goods or services when procured for construction of immovable property, input credit for the said goods and services are not allowed. So there is an explanation which says that construction includes reconstruction, renovation, addition, alteration, even it includes repairs, but only to the extent it is capitalized. So the construction has been defined that it includes even repairs, but to the extent only when it is capitalized. There is even an exception to the said services like earlier, where the said input credit is used for making an outward taxable supplies. So we will again go back to the question, which states that company A is a manufacturer of machinery, and for renovation it has incurred certain expenditure, and all the expenditure are being capitalized. Since expenditure are capitalized, the credit for all of the same would not be eligible, because it would be treated the same would be in works, contract, services, and would be treated as a block credit. Next question was the said expenses being treated if all the said expenses are treated as a revenue expenditure. since the expenditure which are incurred are treated as a revenue expenditure and nothing has been capitalized, the proviso would, the explanation would take impact like construction means only to the expenses to the extent it is capitalized. Since it is a revenue expenditure, the proviso would not, the section would not hit, and all ITC would be eligible for the same. There is another thing like works contract services when procured or constructed for immovable property, but there is an exception. Plant and machinery has been carved out from works contract services. So works contract services in relation to plant and machinery is allowed. So in the second question, flooring work done where machinery is installed and it is special purpose flooring. So that special purpose flooring is required for the machinery. So it would be part of plant machinery only, and hence credit for the same would be allowed. If the company provides only labor contractor to the contractor. So in this case, company has divided its contract into labor and material contract separately. So since labor and material has been separate, even if the material and labor has been separated, credit for the same would not be allowed to the company. And last question, the said repair is done to the building and the same is also treated as an revenue expenditure, but it is for his own use of the business and not for the business own use and not for the business use. The first and foremost condition for availment of ITC is that it should be used for business purposes or for furtherance of business. Own use, any expenditure for own use is not allowed. So in fourth scenario also, credit for the same would not be allowed. Dushyant, I hear.
Dipen,
Huh,
just a second. Dushyant,
Yeah.
there is one query which has been raised by one of the participants on the same aspect. Whether GST credit will allow on food and beverage if same expense is incurred for the client's meeting for new business.
Yeah, so that is what Abhay bhai we mentioned, that as such it is a block credit. Even if it is for business, it is not allowed because it is ITC block for food and beverages. Even if it is for your business purpose, it is not allowed.
Okay.
But exception is if you are in the business of providing food and beverages, then obtaining or credit pertaining to the food and other services allowed. So in your query, I think
One more query is coming. Doubt regarding event management service, where you said that services of rent-a-cab is eligible. Please specify if possible.
Would you like to take? Yeah.
So in this case, event management services, it was specifically mentioned in the contract that in case of event management service, rent-a-cab service is a part of event management services and they were paid for the said services. Since even a rent-a-cab service has an exception to it. Just I will take you to the provisions.
Yeah.
Once again.
So I wanted to just keep in one thing here. What Dipen wanted to highlight is whenever there is a taxable supply, outward taxable supply, and in the contract, so whenever you are providing any block credit also as a part of ancillary services or a part of services to your main services to the client, there if it is mentioned in the contract that you need to provide and definitely you are getting value of it, then those services will be eligible.
So the exception exactly is input services which are used outward taxable supply. So outward taxable supply means outward taxable supply of the same category or outward taxable supply which is an element of a mix or composite supply. So in that scenario, all credit would be allowed. So in event
even if it is your main part of activity taxable outward supply, but some other ancillary services goes as a part of composite or mixed type of a nature. Like I have given the example of the security services, wherein certain services also goes as a part of my main security services. Then the main, even if it is a block, but I am also in the nature of, I am also providing the same category of services, though as a part of my composite contract, there I am eligible for the ITC. All right, Dipen, you can take it further.
Immovable property regarding anything?
Yeah, so immovable property, we wanted to basically highlight that there are a lot of issues where people think that if I capitalize, I may not get. If I put it in the revenue head, I will get it. Especially for a smaller type of setup. because for a bigger, it is all established. There is a lot of deliberation between the management, auditor, internal auditor that goes off. So that is fine. So we wanted to highlight basically, and see, many of the terms in, let me tell you, many of the terms in GSTs are not defined because the law doesn't cover each and every word which is used in GST. So you need to take help of like, our traditional thoughts and what we have learned so many years, that we need to take help of other laws. Like, like this, capital or revenue, we need to take help of maybe income tax or company law, how it is capitalized. So there are case laws available as to whether it will be capital or revenue, or whether it is forcefully somebody tries to put it into revenue or not. So those discussion will definitely creep in, and that deliberation will definitely creep in. Then there may be some certain difference of opinion between the auditor and the management. But as a GST auditor or as a GST consultant, more or less my role will be simple, that I will ask management whether you will be able to demonstrate or not, whether it is a revenue or definitely I will apply my mind as an auditor, but I will also would like to check the internal documents, the contracts, the thought process, the deliberation, and the internal auditor views also. And accordingly, one can take the view whether it is really capital or revenue, and that is what. But the only thing is, there are a lot of discussion between the plant or machinery, because the word here used is plant or machinery, and generally we use the word plant and machinery. So wherever because there it is a specifically defined plant and machinery. So specific construction of plant and machinery, like Deepan said, the base construction for plant and machinery, because that base is required for that machinery to be settled or set for longer duration or longer life, then it is allowed. So there the issue is whether it is a plant or machinery for my business, because many of the times there are the discussion. So then we need to see the history. The lot of case flows are available, and one need to take the call accordingly. So the idea is exception is plant and machinery, and of course the difference between revenue and capital. So let me tell you that we don't want here the crystal clear answer, but we wanted to highlight that these are the issues where you need to be a little slow down and let us understand the law, because it is not as simple as blocked or capital or revenue, just one liner thought. We need to go a little deep down, consult the consultant or have a discussion, because these are all big time expenditure and these are all big time ITC. So that is what the the point of highlight for this case study. Thanks,
Also,
Deepan. You can take it. Yeah.
also there should be consciousness between statutory auditor, GST auditor, and the company. All the three should be on the same page.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I said that management and auditor are on a different viewpoint. But then GST auditor will creep in, and then he will tell that how to go about it. So it happens in other areas also. Like that, it can happen in GST also. So one has to be very careful before structuring or before designing such type of big transactions. Next.
Yeah. Next is reversal of input credit on account of exempted or non-taxable sales. So in the given example, company A is a trader in goods. It is a trader of taxable goods as well as exempted goods. Following are details of sales, purchase, expenses for the month. During the month, there is a taxable sales of 3 lakhs and exempted or nil rated sales of taxable sales of 7 lakhs and nil rated or exempted sales of 3 lakhs. So total sales is 10 lakhs. Input credit which is attributable or related to taxable goods is 50,000, exempted goods is 15,000, and common credit which is not specifically for exempted or taxable goods is 10,000. So what would be the eligible ITC for the month? There are certain few other questions as well. In case during the month company A has sold land for 5 lakh rupees, value adapted for stamp duty purpose is 4 lakh rupees. What would be the eligible ITC? Third question, during the month company A has started dealing in shares. He has purchased shares. He has purchased only shares of rupees 10 lakhs. Second scenario is company has sold shares of 10 lakhs. And the third scenario is company has purchased shares of 5 lakhs and sold shares of 10 lakhs. So what would be the eligible ITC? And in the fourth scenario, during the month, company A has an high seas sales of rupees 4 lakh. So starting with, so the relevant provisions for the section are section 17.2 and 17.3. which states that section 17(2) states that input credit which is attributable to only taxable supplies, including zero dated supplies, are eligible credit. So in this input credit which is attributable to an exempted supply or nil rated supply, it is an ineligible credit as per section 17(2). So going to the question, first question, what would be eligible ITC for? Taxable sales is 7 lakh rupees, exempted sales is 3 lakh rupees. So exempted sales is 30% of our total sales. Input credit in relation to taxable goods is 50,000. So this 50,000 fully would be eligible. Next is exempted goods. Input credit is 15,000. That 15,000 would be not be eligible. And common credit, which is common for taxable as well as exempted goods. So in that only 70%, which is a ratio of taxable sales, would be eligible. So only 7,000 would be eligible. So coming to section 17(3), which states that value of exempted supply as per section 17(2) shall include supplies that include supplies, that is transaction in securities, sale of land and sale of building. So as such, these transactions are not at all a supply, but for the purpose of reversal. Section 17(3) states that transaction in security is also to be treated as exempted supply. Transaction means sale of land and sale of building is also to be treated as an exempted supply. So so since it is an exempted supply, so what value has to be taken for this supply has been given in after Rule 45. In this rule, they have determined what value has to be adopted for the purpose of taking exempted supply value. So for the purpose of value of land and building, they stated that value as adopted for the purpose of payment of stamp duty. So in case of land or building, value as adopted for the purpose of stamp duty has to be taken as a value as an exempted supply, not the transaction value. And value of securities shall be taken as 1% of the sale value of such securities. So in this scenario, transaction in securities would be, the value of the same would be 1% of the sale value of the security. In this, they specifically mentioned sale value of the securities. So coming back to our example, in second scenario, the company has sold land of rupees 5 lakhs. Value adopted for the purpose is 4 lakh rupees. So in our earlier, as stated above, total sales was 10 lakh rupees. Out of that, 7 lakh was taxable sales, 3 lakh was exempted sales, and now another 4 lakh would be treated as an exempted sales. So the ratio for the same would be 7:7. So out of 14 lakhs, 50% is an exempted sales. So common credit, only there will be deduction in common credit. So common credit of 10,000, out of that only 50% would be eligible. So credit for rupees 5,000 would only be eligible. In this case, company A started dealing in shares. Company A has purchased shares of rupees 10 lakhs. So as per the valuation rule, only sale value is to be considered for the valuation purpose. So in first scenario, that would not be any change even if company has purchased shares, because transaction in securities, they specifically mention that sale value only to be considered, not purchase value. In second scenario, sold sales of rupees 10 lakhs. So in this case, rupees 10,000 would be added as an exempted value, and accordingly we need to derive for the ratio of exempted and taxable supplies. In third scenario, purchase shares of rupees 5 lakhs and sold shares of rupees 10 lakhs. So in this case also, the transaction in securities is of rupees 15 lakhs, but valuation purpose, value is to be taken only 1% of the sale value. So 1% of sale value 10,000. So that needs to be added as an exempted sales. The last question was, company has an IGS sales of rupees 4 lakhs. In this, the schedule 3 of the CGST Act, which states that activity which are not considered as a supply. So in this they have specifically list down certain activities which are not a supply at all. In this, they have mentioned high sales as the said activity is not a supply at all. Since it is not a supply, there is not a question of including the same as an exempted supply.
Deepen, please
Yeah.
mention what is high-seas sales, because a lot of people may not be knowing. Please
Okay.
just explain what is high-seas.
So high-seas sales is in sales which which in the course of sales in the course of import. So when the goods are imported, before it reaches the
Deepan, we are unable to hear you. Dushyant?
Yeah, so
Dushyant, you may take up.
yeah. So Deepen was just mentioning what is high-seas sales. So high-seas sales basically is a sales where before it reaches the custom frontier in India, and while it is imported, before that reaches, you make a sales transaction of that, and accordingly that is high-seas sales. So basically it's an normal language, it is called out-to-out sales. So before it comes to Indian territory, taxable territory, it is sold off. So that is what is high-seas sales. Uh, yeah, Deepan, are you there now? Because the slides are not there.
We are,
Depends network is, I think, he has just uh, gone off. If you can take up
Yeah,
the other.
yeah. So just a minute. I'll start the other case studies. In between, Deepan just comes in. So basically, here the idea was, these are, though it looks very simple case study, the case study number 3, what Deepan was mentioning before, his communication got off. So basically, the idea was there are small these transactions like securities or sell of land, one-off transaction, but the value is so high that many a times we forget, taking it the proportionate ITC, because even the common credit is so huge. And we have seen in service tax audit and even in GST audit times also, at the time of audit, when it comes to the management that this is the ineligible credit, though we never knew, but then these are the transactions which leads to a lot of ITC dilution. So that is what we wanted to mention, because when in shares and securities, we have learned it, section 14 and 8D in income tax, what is the big impact, and a lot of litigations has gone and reached up to High Court or maybe Supreme Court. So these are the transactions which are always there in GST also, and one need to be very careful when you enter the transaction, or at least when you file GST return. So it is not only inward and outward. Okay, so we'll move to case study number 4. I'm audible, right?
yeah, Dushyant, you are audible.
Yeah. So I think the screen is.
I'm just waiting for Deepan to join. But
Yeah. The meantime, I'll be able to carry on with the case study number 4, which is immovable property, hotel charges paid outside the state. So the participants can refer the case study if it is available with them. Otherwise, I'm reading for them. So company A is a service provider and is registered in Maharashtra. It has set up an office in Gujarat for assisting Maharashtra office in providing services. It has not obtained registration in Gujarat. So basically, company A is Maharashtra, and there is a office set up in Gujarat for assisting Maharashtra office. There is an office in, of course, in Gujarat, and the landowner has charged IGST for rental services provided by landowner. All right. Also, the management of the company A had meeting with the clients at Bangalore. So what has happened is Maharashtra people, the company is a service company. So when they go out, and a lot of management people or the key management personnel go to other cities, and they have meeting in other cities or other states. They had booked hotel where hotel has charged C plus S for invoice raised at Bangalore. Of course, the Bangalore people will, the hotel will charge C plus S. Okay. And now the query is whether company A is eligible to take credit for the IGST charge for Gujarat office and also for C plus S charge for Bangalore hotel. So let me take you through the basic, the law, section 12(3) of IGST Act state that the place of, here the important thing is, as you know, that it's a little tricky for immovable property and related transaction, hotel and other, seminars or those type of transactions, because these are all exception. So the place of supply of services for this type of transaction is which are in relation to an immovable property shall be the location at which the immovable property is located. So in our example, when we know that the Gujarat client, the Gujarat office, when it is run at particular place, that office, the landowner charges C plus S, and even if it is forcefully charged as IGST, one should mention them, because a lot of times what happens is when we give our a GST number, the service provider, maybe here in our case the landowner in Gujarat office, they are not educated, and they by error or by knowing unknowingly to have the transaction happen, they charge IGST. It's of course an error from their side, and the accountant here take the credit also. So one should educate them that please charge C plus S because it is related to immovable property transaction, and of course the GST is our Gujarat office is not registered, so there is no question of any credit in that regard. And if it is charged IGST, one should educate them and cancel that invoice and get a fresh invoice. That is what we wanted to bring here in question 1. Would your answer be the
Dushyant.
same if
Dushyant, I request you to continue, because there are many people who are mentioning that Dipen's audio is not clear. So
All right.
Dipen, let Dushyant continue with the audio
and
discussion.
he can change the slides whenever
Right. Yes.
Deepan,
Yes.
comfortable?
Yes, comfortable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So would your answer be the same if hotel, and whenever you Deepan, you would like to add something, because a lot of time what I have prepared is something on a technical or other. So whenever you want to chip in, you can also chip in when you feel that this is what is required, right, Deepan?
Sure.
Okay. So would your answer be the same if the hotel had charged IGST, right? In this case, the again, that is what I was mentioning, that normally the hotel, if the small, many times what happens initially, small hotel setup, they are also doing a lot of errors. Then the marketing people, when they go and they know that this is my GST number, but that GST number pertains to the other state. And the hotel, when they find that this is a different state number, they charge IGST. And happily that man comes to the management and submits the bill. And here also we take the credit. So here also is the same example. Both the examples, though the transaction is different, but the idea is to give you the basic thing that C plus S of any other state is not available. And even if they try and charge forcefully IGST, that credit is wrong and it is ineligible. Because many times what happens, if they charge IGST, you will find that transaction in 2A also, right? So then the control is lost. Once you find in 2A and it is in your books, you will map and the return is filed. Only thing is when it comes to the audit or some scrutiny, that time you will come to know. And by and large, nowadays, a lot of small companies have a pan-India setup, and a lot of marketing and other stuff moves out of the state. And when they are not registered, these are absolutely not eligible credit. And there is a definitely, interest and penalty sword, which is always hanging on the corporate. So though it looks a very simple example, but one has to be very careful here. Next is Dipen, courier services. Yeah. So I'll just read for everyone. Company A is a dealer in pharma products in Maharashtra. It transports all its medicines and equipment through a courier company registered and located in Maharashtra to its customers. So basically, the company is distributing the pharma products, and they have hired the courier company. The courier company transports goods all over India to the customers of the company and charges C plus S on the said services provided. Also, company A has received an order from a foreign customer and has sent the medicines through courier to the customer. In this case, courier company has charged IGST on the said transaction. Now the question, whether the company is justified in charging IGST on their export. Since there are simple two questions, I will take both together. Whether company A can avail credit of the IGST charged by the courier company. Now, here the law. It's a little tricky law, and frankly, I would like all your attention, because here the government wanted to do something else, but by amending certain things, the end result is something very funny and which is denting a lot of ITC. The section 12.8 for these courier services, we need to refer. The place of supply of services by of transportation of goods, including mail or courier, mark the word including mail or courier, to a registered person shall be the location of such person. So in our example of local services from courier, local services, local distribution from courier services to the company, it is very simple because the location of such person means the provider, the receiver. But provided that a very important proviso where the transportation of goods is to a place outside India, the place of supply shall be the place of destination of such goods. So mark the word destination of such goods. When the courier company is exporting the courier packets to other foreign countries, the place of supply shall be those countries. Now what will happen is, though the pharma company in our example, even if you can just shift the our example, the previous slide, So the pharma company is in Maharashtra, and the place of supply will be the country X, say for example Sri Lanka, and the courier company is also maybe in Maharashtra, right? Now the place of supply, since it is outside Maharashtra, definitely that credit is not eligible, and that is what we wanted to emphasize. Though both of them are here, but because of this condition, the destination of goods becomes the the place of supply, the credit is ineligible. So in this example, yeah. And one more thing I want to tell here, only you can just structure the transaction. Say what you can do is, either the company can appoint, if see there is a lot of ITC and it is just going because of the simple the law. One can structure the transaction that one can hire the foreign courier company. What will happen is, say if I twist this example, if you hire the foreign company for distribution for your foreign client, right, you just export to that company and that company distributes. They may charge you whatever services they call it, and then at the most, as per my understanding and my view, it will be a reverse charge, and that is always available as an ITC. So this type of tricky transaction, if you think beyond out of box, you can just try and capture the credit, because it will be a huge credit because of the logistic, So that is what we wanted to highlight here. And one can also think of appointing an agent there, like courier agency, and can structure the transaction for foreign countries. So that is what we wanted to highlight. Deepan, you want to add something here?
Before that, Dushyant.
Yeah.
Dushyant, there are two queries which have been received on case study 4. If you can just address them. One is simple one. So does this go to say that if we do not have GST registration of the state where we have received services, then we are ineligible to take credit, input credit?
Yes.
Correct.
So whenever, supposing in the example, what I've understood the query is, supposing in our example, the Gujarat ITC is there, C+S, and you are in Maharashtra, and when you go to a hotel in Gujarat and then they charge you C+S, definitely that credit is gone. That is a cost to you.
Yes. And one more query is there. Staying hotel is eligible for ITC. In case of composite services, food consumed, there is also eligible. That is also eligible for ITC. What if hotel issues separate invoice for stay and food?
So definitely stay, if it is in the same state. Say supposing I'm in Maharashtra and I happen to go to stay for a hotel for my business purpose, then definitely that credit is eligible. As per normally stay, the hotel is not in block credit, but food is definitely there. And if you receive the invoice separately, definitely then it will be very easy for you to identify food is separate and stay is separate, and you will be eligible for that credit.
Okay, you can go ahead, Dushyant.
Yeah. So Deepan, next. Deepan, you want to add in courier services something?
No, it is covered.
Yeah. So number 6.
No,
okay. Consequences. Yeah, Deepan, you can take this up if the voice is clear. Interest.
Is it clear?
Yeah, clear.
Yeah. So what are the consequences for wrong credit availment in case of block credit or non-reversal of input credit for exempted goods, or taking input credit of ineligible good? So what would be the consequences? First consequences would be interest. Interest at the rate 24% needs to be paid from the date of availment till the date of actual reversal. So in this scenario, company, if they have taken any ineligible credit or wrong credit, they need to reverse the credit, and also they need to pay interest at the rate 24% on the same. Second, which consequences for for wrong availment would be penalty. So in case officer finds that you have taken some credit which is an ineligible credit or wrong credit, and if they issue a show cause notice, and within 30 days if payment has been done or reversal has been done, then there would be no penalty on the same. But if the same is not done within 30 days, 10% of corresponding tax or 10,000 rupees, whichever is higher, would be penalty levied on the same. So our recommendation would be that in case if any wrong credit is availed and management or the company knows that following are the wrong credit taken, they need to voluntarily reverse the same along with form DRC 03. Just making payment and the payment is available in cash balance would not suffice. So you need to file form DRC 03 whereby you discharge your liability and interest liability. Nishan, by your views?
Yeah. No, it's the same. Basically, we wanted to caution here that ineligible, you need to identify what is eligible, ineligible, both ways. And if it is ineligible and you know that it is ineligible, then definitely one should immediately put it into action and whatever to be done needful. It has to be done because the interest rate is 24%, and again the penalties is again hanging spot. So the action should be fast and immediate, and if it is very clear that it is ineligible, one should immediately do the reversal and pay the dues. Yeah, depend next.
Next is related party transactions. This is one of the
Yeah. Sorry, I'll take this.
Dushanta, you continue please, because voice is
yeah.
cracking.
I understand. So related party transactions, case study 6. Yeah, depend next. You can just, because it is only one line which is appearing. Yeah. So company A and company B are related parties as defined in the GST, and there is a huge and big definition of what is related. One can refer, but here we are taking an example to give you an idea as to how the valuation plays a role. And we have learned a lot of things in domestic and international transfer pricing also. So at the same time, the principles are more or less same, but how it works in GST, that is by way of a small case study we wanted to try. A sells goods to B at an agreed price of rupees 110. The actual cost of production of company A is 100. Actual sale price and MRP to outsider is rupees 150. All right. And the question is whether the value charge in the said transaction would be considered fair market value charge, and B, whether your answer would remain the same in the following scenario. There are 3 scenarios given. Before that, I think let us go to the the valuation law part, rules. Depend if you can talk. Yeah. So the rules are very clear, but how and when it applies, that's only the trick, and that is only the understanding which is required. So first is rule 28, which is very important of CGST Act. Value of supply between distinct or related persons shall. So here they are covering both distinct, that is my other branch in the other state, or related party. So for both of them, the valuation rule plays an important role. Open market value of such supply. So wherever there is, as you know, that any transaction value which you are dealing with, any outsider will be considered as open market value, or of such like kind and like quality. So which is available in the market fairly, it is fine. So that has to be applied. If that is not available easily, then if above not available, then the value of supply of like kind and quality. So whenever I'm selling a laptop, say unbranded laptop, and if it is then open market value is not available, I will go and search the like kind and like quality and the functionality and the use. Those are the principles which will be applied. So the first row is very crystal clear. The second row is then you need to apply certain principles. And the third is if the second is also not, because there are certain products where definitely you can't just apply like kind and like quality very easily. So then if the above both are not available, and then the value as determined in the rule 30. So 30 and 31 is very specific rules, but in our examples will not go to those levels because that is not applicable. So depend, you can just provided that the amount equivalent to that, there is one proviso to 90% of the price charged by the recipient to his customer, not related person, can be, I'll give you and explain also what does they mean by this, can be adopted by the supplier. All right. And provided for the recipient is eligible for full input tax credit, the value declared in the invoice shall be deemed to be the open market value. Here I wanted to highlight that earlier what people used to understand this proviso, the second proviso is, if my related party is there or my branch is there, I will charge 1 rupee also, that is fine for value, because there is a proviso which is very clear, and a lot of tax consultants and people were deliberating and understanding that whatever I charge will be taken as agreed because it is there, proviso is there. But it's not that. There is a specific AR, and then people also have realized that the reasonability has to be taken up. That proviso can't be read in the way it is given. It has to be linked with after applying the above principles, and then the proviso should be read, not read in blind. Okay, so let us go to our case study, Deepen. So here, what has happened is company has and company A and company B are related parties, and agreed price of 110. So here the price charge is 110, the cost is 100, and the MRP to outsider is 150. What we are presuming is that B is again a distributor, and he is also going to sell to outsiders which are not related. In the example, that is to be presumed. Now, whether the value charge in the said transaction would be considered as fair market value charge? No, because that is not the fair market value, 110 which is charged. So now in our example, now in B, company charges 135 to company B. Company A charges 135 to company B, right? Now, if you take 150 ka 90%, then accordingly 135 would be more than 90%, and definitely it will be covered. So it is a value properly charged. If both the companies are not related parties, then definitely 110 will be the proper price, and that is the transaction value. If both are not related, we don't have to travel to the valuation rule at all. Even if the MRP outside is 150, my understanding with them is 130, 110, 90, I can charge anything. If company A and company B are not separate companies, but are branches of the same company, would your answer remain the same? Here, if they are branches of the same company, then they fall under the distinct companies. So even if it is not related, but the branches become the distinct companies because both branches are of the same pan, then once it becomes a distinct companies, the valuation rules what we discuss is also applicable to these A and B branches in the example, right? So that is what we wanted to give you the example, that how valuation works and how the transaction should be structured when, because see what happens is, hello?
Yeah, you complete this, then I will just.
Yeah. So what happens is, I wanted to highlight, this is just an example. One can definitely work out because ultimately it's an arithmetic. We wanted to drive a point that lot of time what happens is the branches or the agency transactions are systematically captured by some design, and once the logic is I mean to say logics, and in the SAP or some logics are fitted that this is my cost and this is the logic which my sale price will be this to my branches, right? And a lot of SAP accounting, as we know, that it is run through the logics. So once the logic is wrong, fitted, the valuation becomes tricky. And the important point here I want to drive is, once the valuation is challenged or is not as per the rule, what will happen is, finally after 3-5 years, the value maybe the government, the GST department may tweak your value, or it is challenged. Then the issue is not only higher taxes, but even the ITC is less, because that till that time you have lost your ITC claim also. Plus, like Deepan mentioned about interest and penalties. So this is what, whenever there are fixed logics, those logics, and also if there are some changes in the government ruling for valuation and all, one need to literally be updated. Otherwise, what happens is, the fixed logics once applied, and again this logic, whether it is related, not related, whether it is in the same state, whether they are branches, distinct persons, accordingly one has to define the valuation. Those fixed valuation logics, once it is fitted, then it will be a problem. So the review part is very important for valuation, especially for the branches and the agency agreements and the transaction. Yeah, Abhay, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, you may be taking a step forward, but I will always take you a step backward, because
it's okay. It's always good.
Case study 5. Case study 5. There is one query.
Okay.
For courier company, the place of supply would be outside India, and charge ITC, IGST to client, then why client can't claim the ITC is paid to courier company and courier company has not claimed the refund for the same? Will it be zero rated supply for courier company and claim refund?
Yeah. So it will not be a zero rate supply for because the payment is coming in Indian rupees, first of all. Okay. So because if it is service, the compulsory rule is that it has to be in the for other foreign exchange, convertible currency. So in this example, the place of supply is outside India, but the money comes in Indian rupees. And secondly, so there is no question of refund or anything. They have to just pay. And since the place of supply is outside India, there is no question of taking any ITC. Or further, if somebody has a question, one can email and we can deliberate. But that is what the basic understanding of why ITC is not eligible, because these are the basic problem with the rule change by the government for the courier company, and that is what the big gap which has come because of the change. And there are a lot of representation, but I think nothing has come out from that.
Just to elaborate further,
Yeah.
in this, the courier company would charge IGST stating the place of supply as other territory, not Maharashtra.
Correct.
Since it is an other territory, the credit for the same would not be eligible. Same like as in hotels.
Correct. That is what it is in a foreign country, other territory. Okay, so I think we can go to the next one. So that was regarding the valuation. There are ARs also available. There are, see, AR we have just mentioned 2-3, but in fact a lot of time you will find many ARs from the same state, different views. So we don't frankly depend much on AR. We need to definitely learn and go through the AR, because that will give you a lot of learning and how the government is keeping eye on how government is interpreting the law. But just I wanted to just highlight that once the AR comes, like this is the next example, I think Deepan, you can just change the directors. I think a lot of big newspapers and media has highlighted that now this RCM has come on directors. So we thought fit that let us take this also as a case study, so that there is a learning for all, and most of our clients are corporates. So this is applicable to all, and from the day the thing has come on the media, I think a lot of messages and phone calls. I was thinking that I am not in a lockdown situation. I am working in the office after the this AR has come, especially the Rajasthan one, right? So here the simple case study. The simple case study like director's remuneration. A is a whole-time director. Mark the word whole-time director as drawing remuneration of 20 lakhs per annum. Company deducts TDS under section 192 and pays to the government. Of course, company does not pay GST on RCM, as told by the consultant. Don't pay GST on RCM because he is a director. The question is whether the contention of the company is correct. And let us take second also, whether your answer would be still remain the same if the company pays TDS under section. So we'll take everything together. I'll give the concept as such so that the query is resolved. Pays TDS under section 194J, TDS on professional fees. Company pays sales commission of rupees 5 lakhs. Company pays setting fees of rupees 2 lakhs. Permitting if the director is treated as a professional and is charging GST on the said services provided by him. Next, Deepan. So we'll just understand what is provided in the law, why the anomaly has happened, and what was not read properly or what was not represented properly because of the issue. Schedule 3 of the CGST Act, which mentioned that what are the activities which are not considered as supply at all. The schedule is for that. So services by an employee to the employer, because otherwise a lot of employees will start collecting GST from the company. So that is an exception. So that one schedule 3 is there, always there with the law attached. There is one RCM notification number 13, which is also very important because the AR, they always emphasize on this notification. There it mentions that and mark the word services. Services supplied by a director of a company or a body corporate to the said company or the body corporate. So this is the description of the supply of services, the nature of the transaction. The next step is supplier of services, that is a director of a company or a body corporate, and recipient of services mentioned is the company. Now, this is what the RCM, that these are the transactions where RCM is applicable. It means that the receiver of service will pay GST on the reverse charge. Now, understanding this, now let us go to the previous slide. Please shift the slide. So we have the background, and we know the query now. Let me give you the overall approach so that you will understand. See, basically, as we know that I was mentioning about the director, we know there are a lot of types of directors. There is a separate appointment letter or the contract with the directors, and the people who are more into company law or basically handling companies, they know much about whether it is a whole-time director, executive director, non-executive director, or directors appointed by board of directors, or directors appointed by the nomination. Like a lot of times, the funding comes, or the other other institution directors, like they appoint the nominee as a director. So here the query is regarding the whole-time director, where he is a executive director. His role is to keep an eye on day-to-day work of the company. His earning remuneration. So those type of directors will always be considered as employee, because he is whole-time director, he is executive directors, and will never be covered by giving a professional services, because again you need to go to the our past lot of histories there, past whatever litigations or past court rulings are there. And in fact, the day before yesterday, I could find minimum 15 to 20 citations where the whole-time director, it is very, very clearly mentioned that whole-time or the executive directors or the managing director will always be employees. It is also proved under ESIC Act for various other reasons, and it is proved under the company law also that they are always be believed as the employee of the company, because all other terms with them is always the like an employee. Again, the company deducts TDS. Normally in our case, like in 192, the director is also filing return as a salary, and declaring his income under the head salary. Also, the company is filing TDS under 192. So, and the ITR is also filed from director. So, and the appointment letter. So, here the important thing is the appointment letter, the documentation, how you can demonstrate. So, in our view, if he is a whole-time director, managing director, and the TDS is also properly deducted, there is no RCM. It is always the it is always be exempted under that Schedule 3 category. Now, understanding the concept, now let us go one by one. TDS 194 J में अगर भरा है, TDS has profitability. Here also wanted to see that it is an error of the company, because if the contract is mentioned as the whole-time director or the managing director, and erroneously company has deducted under 194J, they can definitely correct the error if they can do, and still they'll be out of the purview of this RCM. But if it is as a professional only working, the director working as a professional only, then definitely, and deducted TDS under 194J, then RCM would be definitely applicable. Companies pay sales commission. Now, sales commission and all those things will not be covered under the normally the employment contract. There the RCM will be definitely applicable. Company pays setting fees. Here also it will not be a normal employment employee-employer relationship. Here also he will be a non-executive director, and there the RCM will be applicable. And if the director is treated as a professional and he is charging GST on the, now what happens? Many times what happens? I have seen many directors. They are very aggressive. They say no. I will issue an invoice to the company. I will charge GST, and the company pays also GST. And this happens, and the director also files the return and all. Frankly, they should be given proper advice that you should not collect TDS if you are a whole-time or GST. If you are a whole-time director, definitely you should not charge GST. So though company is paying, and frankly company is taking GST also, now there will be a question also in future whether it is a proper GST ITC or not. So one need to be very careful on this type of transaction. But our view remains, because it's a very hot issue nowadays, our view is very clear. If it is a whole-time regular director, executive director, and remuneration is also paid month-to-month basis, and there is an employment contract which is placed, I think there is no reverse charge mechanism required. Next, depends.
Dushyant,
yeah.
There is one query which has come for this only.
Hope that is only for the 7, otherwise not for past.
Yeah, no, they are mentioning as per Columbia Asia Hospitals Private Limited. AAR, Karnataka,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
held that the activities performed by the employees at the corporate office in the course of or in relation to employment, such as accounting, other administrative and IT system maintenance for the units located in the other states as well, that is distinct persons, as per section 25(4) of the CST Act, shall be treated as supply as per entry 2 of Schedule 1 of the CGST Act.
Correct.
In that case,
Correct.
also TDS of employees, employees also deducted under one end, then we counter before department.
Yeah. So frankly, it's a very big challenge. The question is regarding the cross charge and ISD. And here I mean, take on another half an hour. But my only suggestion, we are covering this in the next maybe case study, though in a different angle. But let me give a general idea as to, frankly, there are not only Columbia Asia, but there are other AR also where they are discussing about the the branches giving support to the head office, and whether there will be it's an independent supply, because that state is that employees of that company are not the employees of that company for that branch, because though the client argues, or the SSC argues, that they are Pan India and they are the employees of the company, but here there are a lot of fact finding, and that argument of directors will not be here only for 192, because here the remuneration which is paid to director is definitely under the category of employer-employee contract, and that cross charge and this RCM is definitely two different issues. So I may take up separately whenever we are coming up, but frankly, still our view remains the same, that once, because if you go to cross charge, there is no end, because cross charge you will find that the branch is giving you the services, again the head office is also giving facility. So till what time you will go down deep down, and that is not the intention of the law, again when you are getting the full credit. So after the Columbia Asia, I don't think there are another so many ARs for this branch, and those type of setup and transactions. So that issue is even not being more taken up by the department also. And let us hear some more ARs, but otherwise we are of the view that there should not be cross charge for these type of transactions.
Thanks, Dushyant.
Yeah.
But I think you will have to be a bit fast, because we are left with 10 minutes.
So what we will do is, I think we will cover up the case studies properly, because the documentation part we are definitely going to present them by way of a mass email. So I don't think, as I have already given the basics of the documentation why we wanted to touch, because these are the very key important documents which one has, and we have given very categorically A, B, C, D, all the the narrative ways. So I think we'll not touch upon documents. If some queries are there, we'll touch upon. Otherwise, we'll finish
at the end there are 2 or 3 more queries, so we will keep some time for that.
Yeah, for that. So intermediary, again, it is like a director only. Intermediary is always our favorite subject, like other areas. Intermediary as such, let us understand the query first. Mr. B is an agent registered in Maharashtra, providing services of arranging for raw material to company A, registered in Gujarat. So I am in. So B is in Maharashtra, A is Gujarat, and he is arranging the raw material from sourcing the raw material. B charges a sum of rupees 1 lakh per month plus GST on said arrangement. So for the service, 1 lakh is charged. Whether Mr. B should charge IGS on the same transaction, or he should charge C plus S if he is sourcing from India, from outside India. Okay, that is the first query. And secondly is, what will be the answer income? So I think let us take A first, and depend if you can open the references, if any, available. So yeah. So important definition, why intermediary we have taken as one of the case study. Most of the chargeability of GST depends on the service provider place of supply, right? But for intermediary, what has happened is, the government has smartly, even in service tax era which was there, intermediary is the person who is in between, who is an agent. A normal sense is, he is between the two person. He is arranging or facilitator, or facilitates the transaction. So he is a person who has no authority as such for the transaction, but he facilitates the transaction to happen. And for that he is paid either from A or B or from both. So that is what intermediary as a normal understanding. Now, having understood that, means a person who arranges or facilitates the supply of goods or services, or both, or securities. Now, section reference, I will not go into technicalities because only thing is place of supply defined is for intermediary where the supplier recipient is in India shall be the location of recipient of service, recipient of person, right? So for a transaction for intermediary and the other person, the place of supply will be the location of recipient of services. Next, depend. No, next in the reference, yeah. And for international transaction, understand place of supply of services where the supplier, the recipient is outside India, shall be the location of the supplier of services. Understand? Here for intermediary, though it is international transaction, and you are receiving money in foreign currency, the place of supply is considered as supplier of services, that is intermediary. Please mark this change. In the earlier 12(2)(a), the place of supply is the recipient of services. Here it is the supplier of services, right? And in 8(2), interstate supply, subject to the provision of section 12, that is above, where the location of the supplier and the place of supply are in the same state. So let us not go into more technicality. Now let us go to the query. I will give a simple example, and I think then the query can be deliberated. So having understood the law, let us go to the okay, whether Mr. B should charge IGST on the said transaction, or he should charge C+S if he's sourcing. So sourcing also, what has done is sourcing one. Let us take one example. He's sourcing from India, say from Rajasthan, and Mr. B is in Maharashtra and gives this material from Rajasthan, and I mean arranges this material from Rajasthan to Gujarat. So what will happen is, in this case, he will charge IGST because, as we have understood for local transaction, he will charge as per the place of supply will be the location of the person who is receiving the services. So why we have given two examples, sourcing outside India or sourcing from India. From wherever you source, if the transaction is happening between you and the recipient of service, you are both in India, then though you become intermediary, but then the sourcing from anywhere will not have much importance. The importance is where you are located, where the recipient is located, and where is the place of supply. So just sourcing is just to tweak the example. Otherwise, sourcing has no reference or importance for this transaction. B, what would be your answer if company A is a foreign company and Mr. B is in? Now here the change is, instead of local, company A is a foreign company, and Mr. B is intending to show the said services, export of services, since he is receiving amount in foreign currency from. Now what has happened is, company A is in, say, supposing Sri Lanka. Now let us take A. From Rajasthan, I am providing the services of arranging from Rajasthan that material to Sri Lanka. Definitely I am getting commission or whatever service charges from Mr. A from Sri Lanka in foreign currency. And I would like that normally whenever I am receiving for any services in foreign currency, I would always like to take that as a export of services. But no, since intermediary, because I am intermediary and place of supply of services for me is Maharashtra or wherever I am my register office is, then the transaction become taxable. Though I am receiving money in foreign currency, the transaction become taxable, and I will have to charge GST accordingly. Lot of hue and cry, lot of writ petition is filed, but let us hear that some good law prevails. And so here also, even if I am sourcing material from Rajasthan or say from Bangladesh to Sri Lanka, but since I am an intermediary, though my customer is in foreign country and gives me in foreign currency, I need to charge the tax. The GST is applicable, and it will not be exempted. All right, next. But only thing is, intermediary I wanted to highlight is a lot of time people try to just say that it is P2P. I am not intermediary, but one needs to be very careful about their emails, the contracts, the base documents, because many times you say that I have given the consultancy, and you will try to circumvent the definition of intermediary, or you will claim that I am not an intermediary. But a lot of your other documents, emails, and other stuff will definitely tell that you are an intermediary or your contract. So be careful, because I have come across few transactions wherein they said, oh, it's a consultancy, but frankly it was an intermediary transaction, and there was no consultancy. So one need to be very careful. Yeah.
There is one query on this.
Yeah.
the company is agent for selling the goods in India. Goods are imported in the name of client in Maharashtra and out of Maharashtra.
Okay.
My client is earning commission from foreign parties in foreign currency.
Okay.
The client is paying CGST and SGST on commission received for goods imported in Maharashtra and IGST on commission received for goods imported out of Maharashtra. Whether this practice which is followed is as per the GST Act?
So this query is pertaining to the intermediary or the client who is importing?
Intermediary.
So intermediary, what he is doing? If you can just repeat the query.
He is earning commission from foreign parties.
Okay.
And the company, that is the client on whom is raising the invoice, is paying CGST and SGST on commission received for goods imported in Maharashtra.
For goods imported in Maharashtra, he receives the commission.
And company is paying CGST and SGST on
But why
commission
company?
received for
The
client,
intermediary will pay the GST.
I feel it is agent who is raising the invoice by claiming CGST and SGST and IGST on commission received for goods imported. I think I will give him a reply that we will take this offline.
Yeah. So I'll be available always. Yeah.
Okay.
Let us go. So further, interest on delayed payment of tax. Here it's a very small example, but nicely come out in the case study. Basically, we wanted to highlight because there are a lot of show cause notices, a lot of bank account attached cases we have seen for various reasons from the department, because department was lack of having the revenue from for GST, and they were hampering upon the interest, and some 42 crores they were expecting as interest revenue. As interest revenue, I will repeat the word. So that is how there are a lot of notices and bank account without giving show cause, without giving any hearing notice, were just attached and even siphon off. I mean, from the bank account, it was just gone out to the government treasury. Those are the live cases. And then the government realized. So we wanted to highlight this by a case study so one can understand. Company is having its financial difficulty, and hence company was not able to file GST returns on time. Detailed chart. So we have given the chart where it's a self-explanatory. What I wanted to highlight here is the gross. So the issue was the department wanted to charge interest on the gross liability. The argument was very simple from them. Till you file GST or 3B, your credit, you are not mapping to the outward liability. So your liability will remain always as outward. In our example, first example, the department was telling your gross liability or the outward taxable liability will always be 1 lakh. And since I am eligible ITC for 50,000, but till you file the return, it is not knocked off. And the net liability, which I feel is always under any law, the interest, even if it is charged, is always on a net interest or net liability. But the department, GST department, was not taking that same view. They were because there are a lot of technical arguments. I will not go into much on technical, but basically they were on the view that the interest is chargeable always on gross because the return is not filed; it is filed late. And SSC, the client, the consultant, were of the view that it is always on a net. But then, thankfully, they have clarified. They have the amendment is still awaited, but they have clarified the law. A lot of time it is discussed, represented, and finally, one need to pay only on the net liability. So, but only thing is, here in the example given, due date is 20th of May, date of payment is 5th June, and date of filing of return is 10th June. But the interest has to be paid till not date of payment of 5th June, till filing of the return. But interest has to be paid on only 50,000. So due date was 20th May. You can count the days because I have not given the calculation here. But from 20th of May till 10th of June, the interest has to be paid at 18%. The query is there, but I have just given you the answer. 18% only because it is from my side voluntarily. There is no forceful or something which is dig up by the department. So it is only 18% from 20th of May to 10th of June on 50,000. In the next, he has made the part payment 25,000. The other liability and outward tax liability remains the same. ITC is 75,000. Our gross is 125. So the net remains the same, but I have paid in 25 part. So one installment is paid in 20th July and 15th August. Due date is of course 20th of June. and now filing of return is 15th August. So here again, I will not get the benefit of making payment early, though it is also being demonstrated and argued, and representation has gone. Since I have paid in the government treasury, but there is also a counter argument that once you have paid in cash ledger, you are eligible for refund. Of course, that refund there is no interest, but at least I will not go to the aggressive view of gross liability, or I will not calculate interest only up to the date of payment, that is 20th of July or 15th August. I would rather advise, or my view is simple, our view is simple of this, from our GST team, is that the interest should be paid at 18% from due date till 15th of August on net liability, that is 50,000. Right? There are people who are taking the view that from the date of payment, up to the date of payment of the challan, but we are not of the view, because let government clarifies and then it gets. So from here, whether interest would be calculated on gross or net, I think it is net. What would be the number of days? I have already told that due date to filing of the return, not date of payment. Interest is of course 18%. You are requested to assist the accountant, which we usually are doing always. So the reference minutes is also there. Minutes reference section 51 is also is a helping hand, is always there, and rule 85(3) payment or taxes. I am not reading the rules for want of time. Next. So pre-sale and post-sales discount. This is also a very live query, and many times for clients who have got agencies and other agreements with the branches and all, those who are authorized agents pan India. I think discount is always there because of slow sales, like sale, other conditions, buy one get one. So many types of discounts are there. We have taken only one or two examples. I'll just read out the query first. Company A is a manufacturing auto parts, the supply of parts of various customers. There are certain scenarios regarding discounts, and company desires you to guide it regarding the GST implication on the said transaction. A has sold an auto part having MRP of rupees 50,000 and offered discount of rupees 10,000 in invoice, and billed to the customers as rupees 50,000. All right, less discount. So it's a trade discount, net 40,000. Company wants to know whether they need to charge tax on 50 or net value of 40. I think they can depend. You can just show the reference so that whenever it is applying. So section 15(3) is there for value. The value of the supply shall not include any discount which is given before or at the time of supply, recorded in the invoice. Next step. So we have not given here the verbatim of section 15(3). We have given of a simple understanding to have a simple understanding from all of us. After supply, discount is established in terms of an agreement on or before supply. So they said that if it is in the invoice, it is fine. So that will be considered as the proper value. If it is after supply, discount is there, then there should be a pre-agreement. So there should be a pre-understanding before the transaction may be taking place in the future. And again, there is a condition, and input tax credit on the discount on discount. I think there is some type of discount has been reversed by the recipient of the supply. So there are two conditions attached. One is there should be a pre-agreement or pre-understanding, and the other person has accordingly reduced the ITC. That is what the law is. Depend any other references there, or we can straight away go to the. Okay, so let us go to the query. So case A is very simple. It's a trade discount, and of course it is always on 40,000. One can understand. I am not dwelling much on this. A sold goods having MRP of 50,000 on 13th March. Date is important. Invoice the customer with GST with 1 month credit. Due to financial crunch is always there with customer. Company is facing. They requested the customer to make early payment, and they would offer a discount of 2% in case payment is made before 31st March 2020. Customer has accepted the said proposal and ready to make payment. A wants to raise credit note for the discount offered. Whether the company can raise credit note offering discount along with corresponding GST. Here, since it is an afterthought, I'll put it simply, because there is a cash crunch and then they wanted the payment early, 2% discount was offered. There was no pre-agreement or there was no contract of such sort of a discount or credit note. So this is a financial credit note. There is no GST to be attached to this type of discounts. Next, Deepan. See, A has sold goods having MRP of 50,000 on 13th March. On 15th March, it entered into an agreement with the customer. Mark the dates. With the customer offering a discount of 10,000 per unit in case the customer buys additional 2 units before 20th of March. And the customer accepted that and then buys additional 2 units. Then the company has, after approval of the management, issued credit note of 30,000 for all 3 units. So basically 10,000 discount per unit or whatever the bunch of sale each time of 50,000 plus GST. Whether the company has issued proper credit note as per the relevant GST law. Now, what is happening here is there was a one transaction already happened on 30th of March. On 15th March, there is an agreement that you buy additional 2 and I will offer you 30,000 discount. So 20,000 on the other 2 units and 10,000 on the earlier. Now here, in my view, as per my understanding of this particular case study, 20,000 is the eligible discount with GST. 10,000 is not because the transaction has already happened. But now here comes the structuring of the transaction. Why I would reveal that this 30,000 is for these 3 units. I may go and say that this 30,000 is for 2 units, 15,000 each after 15th of March, the 2 transactions. So I can save accordingly and I can reduce, I can charge GST on 30,000 instead of 20,000. So by tweaking just the contract or the transaction or the understanding, one can definitely reduce the liability accordingly. So here the highlight was on that you can change the understanding on the pre-base of the contract and accordingly just try and be with the law. So the query and the answer is simple. If it is only all for 3 units, not for 10,000, the GST will not be charged. It will be a financial credit note. For 20,000, it will be a normal GST credit note. D. A has sold goods having MRP of 50 plus GST on 13th March, wherein as per contract, if payment is made before 5th of April, they would offer discount of 2,000 plus GST. On 20th of March, customer has cancelled his GST number. Mark the date 20th of March. On 2nd April, company has received the payment from its customer and hence the accountant has issued credit note of 2,000 plus GST. Now, I will just take you the end situation, and the customer should be able to reduce the GST. Now, the particular customer has already discontinued with the number. He has cancelled the number. See the input tax credit on the discount one has been reversed by the receiver. In this our example or the case study number D, the discount GST credit note is given, but the customer will not be able to reverse the credit. Now the accountant doesn't know, frankly. So there will be a correction in the return, or if he knows or intimated, he will definitely not charge GST and he will only charge the finance. I will only issue financial credit note. So here depends on the factual condition that if the customer informs, then it is fine. If it doesn't inform, definitely will issue with the credit note. But then I will have to reverse going forward. I should know that he has cancelled his number. It's a fact finding sort of a thing, but all right. Next. I think we are through with the case studies. The document, as I already mentioned, I think these are all very narrative. And if there are some specific queries regarding the documentation, we'll be able to take up offline or anytime. Your GST team is working 24/7. In fact, in lockdown, so not a problem. You can write us for any sort of queries on documentation. But frankly, 1 minute only for the documentation. As I mentioned that these are all very, very important documents. There are a lot of requirements for documentation, but here we have only covered which are very critical, like supply to SEZ or merchant export transaction, because these are all condition-based documents. And if you don't follow the rules of the documentation in the GST, you will be deprived of the concession and a huge liability of interest, penalty, and other things. So keeping in that mind, please study the documentation part. So you'll come to know that very strict and stringent provisions are there for documentation, and not the normal documentation, but these are all very specific documentation which is provided in the rules for documentation. Abhay, if there are some specific queries or Deepan you want to add, one can definitely.
Dushan.
Yeah.
One interesting input has come that if there is any upcoming webinar, you take up issues related to GSTR 9 and GSTR 9C filing.
Okay.
We will definitely consider this suggestion and keep it in mind if we are planning another session.
Sure.
And two queries were there which you may quickly answer.
Okay.
One is interest to be paid from proposed due date or original due date. It was regarding the new revised dates which are announced. For that, a person is asking that interest
Yeah.
to be paid from proposed due date or original due date.
Deepen, you want to add, because I have not gone through that interest part of whether from where.
So in this scenario, they have not extended the actual due date. Only
Correct.
for late filing and interest, they have extended the dates. So in case you are not fulfilling the condition of filing the return before the proposed due date, the normal provisions would override. So interest would be applicable from original due date till actual date of payment.
I also go with the Deepen, because this is the concession given. If you don't follow the condition attached to the concession, I think you are falling back to the normal condition, and you need to pay interest from the day one, from the original due date.
And one more query is there. Since they have relaxed the matching of ITC, same can be followed at the time of refund application of Feb to August 20, or we have to apply for refund based on matching concept.
Deepen, you can take up.
So can you repeat?
Deepen, they are asking for refund, the matching of this concession, like this September, they have given concession that you don't match till August. So whether the same principle will apply for refund also or not?
No, refund will
I
go
don't-
month to month only.
Yeah, month to
Deepen,
month. Refund.
Deepen, you and Dushyant, if you can come on screen now, because once we are
Yes.
concluding, we would like to see your pleasant faces so that we can acknowledge your efforts also. Yeah, so participants, thanks for your valuable time and sparing your valuable time for coming on to this session. And we hope that you have got some value adds from this session. And we will be striving to have more sessions during this lockdown, because still we have around 10 to 13 days left. So we may plan 1 or 2 more sessions. Look out for our announcements and try to join us and be there for the knowledge sharing. Thank you very much all.
Thank you very much for patient hearing and joining in large numbers. Thanks, Abhay Bhai, for
Thank you.
absolute nice support.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deepen and Dushyant, for excellent
Thank
session.
you.
Thank you, Abhay. And there were more than
Thank you.
100 plus participants.
Oh, great to hear, Chetan Bhai.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.